Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
How many of you folks have been out to Waterwise Botanicals? Pretty close to everybody. Great, thank you very much. It's a fun place. One of the things I just want to highlight about going out there is that A, it's out in the country. It's quiet, and it's peaceful, and it's out of the city. And you can sit on a chair between the ponds, and you can watch the turtles climb up onto the turtle logs. And you can watch the catfish that actually look like bull sharks, the way they swim with their dorsal fins coming out of the water, in crystal clear water, except that I haven't figured out how to get them to shave their whiskers so that they actually look like bull sharks swimming around. And so it's a nice place to come and visit. Now, for folks who are into gardening, rather than the fish and wildlife attractions there at the ponds, we have actually taken 1.5 acres of area and planted demonstration gardens, a lot of which you folks have seen. But the purpose of those demonstration gardens is to teach folks a phrase that we use and that we have. We call that phrase water wise without the compromise. Because, right, we are in a tragic drought situation going on. Everybody's being told they have to be water wise. And a lot of times when they get told they have to be water wise, the vision that comes into your head is scary, right? It's like, what's my dead lawn going to look like? What am I going to do with my brown landscape? And so we created 4 or 5 or 6, I don't remember exactly how many, vignettes where we show you that it can be as lush and beautiful and flowery as ever, maybe even more so than when you originally started, and still be water wise. So we have a garden that's called Country Cottage Garden. Looks like an English cottage garden full of perennials and flowers. We have tropical with the whole palm tree thing and everything like that, except we use succulents to bring in not only the water wiseness, but also all the exotic foliage colors and big shiny leaves and things like that. And then we have even a forest planting that backdrops one of the ponds. And we have a big garden that we call South Africa. And you have to pronounce it like that. That's South Africa. But because most of the world's succulents, great succulents, come from Africa and South Africa. And we're picturing what a garden in South Africa might look like. Not that I've ever been there.
She's from there.
I know, that's why I just tipped my hat to her. She'll probably go out there and go, "You're crazy, dude. You don't even know what you're talking about." But anyway, that's our succulent garden. So we just have all these cool things that you can come and take a look at and see what's going on. It's a big place, by the way. It's huge, okay? In fact, it's so big that I was corresponding with a friend of mine who owns a ranch in Texas. And so over the years, I'd tell him about my spread. And then he'd write back and tell me about his spread, and back and forth. And we were doing a little bit of good old, Southern comfort boasting. And one day he goes, "I'm going to come and see your place." And so sure enough, about 3 days later, he shows up at the gate in his pick-em-up truck. He's got the big white truck, got the burly arm hanging out the side of it. He's got the old dirty, sweaty hat. And I am all excited. I come up and I'm like greeting him and everything. And he looks at me and he goes, "Is this it?" And I'm going, "Yeah, look at this, man. It's like almost 20 acres. Look at that. You can, as far as you can see, there's fields of flowers, and you can't see from one end to the other." And he goes, "That's all? This is it?" And I go, "Yeah, and then there's the half-mile hill that's planted in a mosaic pattern of succulents as far as you can see from end to end." And he's going, finally he goes, "Son, let me tell you something." He says, "In my ranch, I get up in the morning at sunrise, and I go out, and I get in my pickup truck, and I start it up, and I drive, and I drive, and I drive, and I drive until sunset before I get to the other side of my ranch." Well, I looked at him, and I was a little embarrassed, and I said, "Yep, I had a truck like that once." We actually also have another 20 acres that's hidden up. We call that Tom's super secret stash of stuff that nobody gets to see. One time I took a person to see it, but then I had to kill her. And that supports the other yard that you come to. But this is a great adventure. It takes about a half a day to just come and see and hang out. We've been having a lot of painters coming out lately, plein air painters. Even had a competition. It was great. So come out, paint, hang out. For you ladies who are so inclined, bring your bikinis, and we have guided dive tours through the larger pond. Okay, I don't want to forget what I came here for today. I thought about it a little bit. Usually I pick the topics, and the topic was picked for me. And the topic, because I said, well, what do you want me to talk on? I can talk on anything. And so they said, bare root plants. And I'm thinking, bare root plants. Bare rooting plants. Bare rooting plants. And I thought about it a lot, and I'm going, let's see, bare rooting plants. Okay, rooting plants would be like taking a cutting, okay, and then you're going to grow a new plant out of it, but you're going to do it bare, right?
Oh, no, don't do that.
I won't do that. Okay, so actually this is an old-fashioned thing that goes way back. This is the kind of thing that goes back decades, if not centuries, because I remember that I'd be with my little great-grandmother, who was about this high, and she would say, oh, well, we're going to go down the block and we're going to get a little slip of something from Maisie Day or Daisy May or whatever, right? That's what we do. And so today we're going to kind of review some of that. I don't know why, because first of all, after we review some of that and show you just some of the basics and how to do it and everything like that, I want to warn you to don't ever do it. Don't ever do it, because that prevents you from coming and buying the plants from me or your neighbor who you gave one of those dang pieces to. So what you learned today, do not do. Do not repeat at home or in your neighborhood. Okay, so how many of you folks have received bare root roses in the mail?
In the mail?
Yeah, you used to do that. Remember, there were catalogs like Jackson and Perkins and Star and Weeks. Has anybody done that this year? You did? There was still a catalog?
No, but like roses you can't get. You
Yeah.
can get from places like For Love of Rose. Just
Oh, yeah, cool. Like there's the Antique Rose Emporium in Texas that still sends out their roses, bare root. So I thought I'd start there. Okay. Now, how many of you folks received a little black card, informational card? Flip it over to the other side, the pink side, not the red side, but the pink side. Is there a rose on there called Pink Cadillac? No, there's not.
Wrong card.
Oh, dang. Okay, write this down, Pink Cadillac, because that's the first rose we're going to look at. Pink Cadillac.
Cadillac.
I see that now, yeah. Okay, Pink Cadillac. Pink Cadillac is a rose that we developed and introduced to the trade not more than about 3 years ago. And what we like about it is that it only grows about knee-high, that you don't think of it as a rose, you just think of it as a bush that you can't make it stop flowering all year round, and you plant somewhere out in your garden. Now, some of you are already probably saying, what is the matter with you, you terrible, irresponsible person, talking about roses when we're in the middle of a water crisis? How could I do that? I should be ashamed of myself. Okay, how many of you guys have driven out, like maybe say along the coast, up towards Central California, and you're driving along, and on this side is the ocean and the beautiful crashing waves and the cliffs, and on this side is for miles these golden pastures and fields going up to the foothills. And as you're driving along out in those golden pastures and fields, you see an old abandoned ranch house and a barn. And they've been abandoned for so long that the barn is starting to collapse. And you can tell that nobody's been there for 30 or 40 years. And of course, nobody's been watering for 30 or 40 years. And what's the one last living remnant of a plant that's still clambering up along the side of the old farmhouse? Why, it's one of those prissy, fussy little grandma's got to take good care of roses growing next to it. So even roses can fit into the Waterwise profile, especially when they're established. Why? Because they're tough. They're bulletproof. And so we do a lot of roses. We grow, and not so much the prissy, hybrid tea, fancy formal rose garden roses, but what are now called landscape roses. Again, bushes that you just put out into the landscape. And then you just let them go. There's really not any special care, maintenance, and they just flower, and it's one of the most colorful things you can put into your garden. So based upon that, and based upon the fact that we grow a couple 100,000 5-gallon landscape roses a year, we developed this rose called Pink Cadillac. And when we first started seeing the blooms on it, the blooms can range up to almost 3.5 inches. So be sure and look it up on our website, which is on the back of your brochure. Look up Pink Cadillac. It blooms all year round, and in fact, its favorite time of blooming is in the dead of winter, when nothing else is happening. Why did we call it Pink Cadillac? Well, because my wife, Jackie, who's my co-founder of the nursery, and the only reason that we were successful, because obviously I'm crazy and don't have any business sense, okay? She looked at that when it was blooming, and she goes, man, it looks footloose and fancy-free, because it's got these ruffles and frills, and it's single petals on the flower arrangement, not that double kind of thing in most roses. She goes, that looks fun and footloose and fancy-free, and it reminds me of Tina Turner driving her pink Cadillac with the top down of the Cadillac. This has become our #2 bestseller of all the roses that we grow. Like I said, it blooms nonstop. It rarely gets higher than about above your knees. And it's got beautiful foliage. And so if you were to go to a rose catalog, or say your friend who lives in Massachusetts went to our website and ordered a Pink Cadillac rose from us, this is what would happen. First of all, we would prune it. Now, do you all remember how to do pruning of roses? You guys have all been trained?
Oh, I know how.
Yeah, you remember? You know how you got to be super careful to find just the right, anything thinner than pencil, and the bud's got to be in the outside direction, and it's got to be at 5 leaves and stuff like that. And those are all good things to learn about rose pruning. Now, the only reason that I'm not doing this in 0.37 seconds with my chainsaw is because security stopped me at the elevator and wouldn't let me bring it in. Okay.
Wow. 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 Where's the photosynthesis?
Where is the photosynthesis?
I don't know.
That's a good question. Actually, when you're shipping bare root, you don't want a lot of photosynthesizing trying to go on, because you're going to be in a dark box, right? So this is what happens. You know, the big rose growers, which are kind of fading out, but in the days of Jackson and Perkin and Starr and stuff like that, you'd go up in the Central Valley and you'd find hundreds of acres of roses. And you'd find them planted in like quarter-mile long stretches of one variety after another. And you know that they had, you know, a troop of 5,000 grandmothers that were out there pruning like this every day, right? No, they have this big wicked machine that's got wheels on each side, about 20 feet wide, and this giant slashing machine that goes down and just mows the beds. Now, I know that sounds like cruel and inhumane punishment. But see, I don't know, have any of you folks ever lived in deer country? You know, where the deer are abundant and active? Like the La Jolla Triangle, there's a big herd of deer that runs around. I'm serious. I went out, I got called on a consulting job one day, and I'm one of the few consultants in the world, because I'm no urban guy, who would walk in between the big glass shining windows and see all the bushes, and they're going, we just don't know why these things won't grow, and they're struggling. And I'm looking down, and I'm going, well, dude, you got deer tracks and crap all over. They're just eating you guys alive. You got a big herd of deer running around through here. Okay? In the Golden Triangle of La Jolla. I can take you there any day. Grab your crossbow. No, I mean. Okay? And so, if you've lived in deer country, you will know that one of the favorite foods in the whole world of deer and rabbits are roses. Now think about the symbiotic relationship. Think about that. See, in nature, there's something coming along and pruning the roses all the time. Roses like to be pruned. It's part of the balance of nature. Circle of life. Okay? Kumbaya, or whatever they say about that. I can't remember that. So, roses like to be pruned. They were meant to be pruned. And so, what happens is when they have the big rose companies that are pruning out the field with that big machine, they're doing the roses a favor. They're reducing the size, then they want to grow back and come back fresh. But see, in the wintertime, they'll go through and they'll do a big pruning like that, and that gets them down to about this size. And then they dig them, take them into a cooled, refrigerated warehouse, and there is where they do the close work and do that last bit of pruning to get out all the thin stems and stuff, get you some nice 4 or 5 or 6 canes, drop it into a box, and send it off to you. Okay? So we're going to kind of do that here.
Can you pass around that cutting so we can smell it and see it?
It has no smell, but I'd love for you to smell it. Do you know that the large majority of landscape roses, and especially the single-petaled roses, have no smell? I don't know why. But if you want to have a rose that smells good, we've got some of them at our nursery. For example, one of the most fragrant roses, and it's very hard to find, is a tea called Just Joey. It's an old
Oh, I love that one.
one of our most fragrant ones is a floribunda called Sunsprite. Brilliant yellow that doesn't fade and blooms all year round. That's a couple that'll just blow you away smell-wise. So I'm glad that you brought it up. And you know, a lot of times I can't smell stuff even when it's got fragrance. My wife says I don't smell very good. Okay, because of the topic today, I mean, you guys all are gardeners. There's not a whole lot to learn. And so that's why we're going to have about 15 minutes of programmed teaching and discussion, and the other hour and 45 minutes is going to be really bad humor. Okay? So all we do is we get in there with my dainty little clippers, and we just cut out the small stems, leave larger stems, because in roses, the larger stems actually do store some sugars and foods and give it a little bit of energy to get started. And we're reducing the size because we're damaging the roots, right? Okay? Now this is not a super strong plant. It doesn't have big woody roots like as if it was growing in the field. It actually had a fairly nice root ball in the can. But you know what? Most roses these days are sold in containers. Most plants are sold in containers. You know, when they started out growing roses and selling them bare root, they didn't have plastic containers. You know, people are going around in the food industry rummaging what they used to call egg cans. And those were metal cans that I remember having when I was a lad, just a mere lad, I mean just a Joey right straight out of the kangaroo. We were cutting those. Every nursery had can cutters that you would shove down and cut the sides and make these wicked edges that the homeowner could really cut themselves up badly with. Okay? So basically, here's the deal. We get this to a nice size on the top. We trim off the bottom. Let's see what we got here. That's not a knife. Now that's a knife. And now you have a nice little bare root plant that will probably do fine. Now the next little step is to simply pack it. And so you just take a little bit of moist sawdust, slip it in, a little bit more moist sawdust, pack it up nice and well, nice and wet, and tie it, put it in a box, and ship it to a state where anything coming from California is quarantined, and the dog will sniff it out and they'll throw it away. That's actually one of the dangers of sending plants to friends and buddies in other states, is say you were a person who lived in Florida and you wanted to bear root a nice little young citrus tree and send it to your friend in the heart of citrus growing California, and you just happen to give them a little memo of wang lung blung bung green damping off citrus disease. Okay? So maybe some of these things are a little archaic, but But basically when you take this, you're just going to plant it. You're going to plant it so that, and it's kept moist for the first few days to a week or so. Sometimes it's cool to still have a little bit of plastic over it to give it some moisture and keep the stems from drying out too fast. But this would be fresh and nice to plant for a few days and water it in good, and you get to take off. Now, I usually love to see folks wrestle to the ground over some of these free gifts, and so I'll keep that up here.
I have a question about the
Yes, ma'am.
humidity
Yes.
in your ranch.
Pardon
Your
me?
spread.
What's the humidity at our spread? Okay, at Daylily Hill, we're 18 miles inland from the ocean. And we get we're on the hill looking down over all of Oceanside Valley right to the water. And that was a little blurb, so when I'm ready to sell my house, y'all will want to buy the Ocean View house that I'm telling you about. And so we get that last coastal breeze. Our climate is really more coastal influence than like the Temecula Valley influence. Okay, but it really doesn't matter. Anything that we're going over today is all the same. You know, unless you're dropping it out in the desert in the summertime where it's 114, you know. But I mean, if we're talking coastal inland, this is going to be a very nice, successful plant if you plant it in the next couple of days. Yes, sir?
Is the rose completely thornless as it matures, or is it just thornless now?
It just doesn't have a lot of thorns, but like Prego spaghetti sauce, they're in there. It's got some. Okay? Now, another great rose that you guys saw on the flyer that we sent out, that I brought, but we won't tear apart because we already know the drill. This is Spanish Red. Spanish Red is a rose that we introduced into the trade probably about 9 years ago. It's a seedling that popped up. I'm an amazing rose breeder. You know how the process of breeding plants and roses is very technical. You have to do complete genomes. You have to keep records. You have to keep data of the family tree of every single rose and parent rose of that rose and cross before that. And you have to have a computer with 400 million gigabytes to store all of that information and everything like that. And so when I hybridize roses, let me tell you, it's really something. You see what I do is I sit out there and I catch a little shade from the Texas umbrella, and I watch the bees fly by, and then I watch them do unspeakable, unmentionable things to my flowers, because it does involve a certain amount of sexuality, and I'm sorry I had to say that in front of you all. And then in the fall, I go out and I start to collect rose hips. Isn't that cool? Do you remember that little saying we used to always say in school, you know, like something or another rose hips, and well, do chickens have lips?
No.
Oh, do roses have hips? Do roses have hips? Well, do chickens have lips? It was a little saying. And so I would go and collect rose hips in the fall, and then I'd take them in and I'd sit by the fireplace, and I'll sit there and carve out the seeds, you know, like 1,000 or so or 2,000, and then I'll carefully monitor those seeds, germinate them, and as we all know, out of thousands of seeds that you plant when you're in the hybridization process to produce good new varieties, very few of those you keep. You might throw out 987 and just keep 13 reasonable candidates. Well, I've done that over and over. A couple thousand seeds, thousands of little baby seedlings. None of them ever turned out any good. The only ones that ever turned out any good is where some stupid seedling popped up in the garden somewhere that I had nothing to do with. And so we got Spanish Red, and we got Pink Cadillac. So, like I say, I'm fairly amazing at rose hybridization. In fact, the more I keep my hands off of it, the better I do. So this plant here, Spanish Red, popped up. Now, you guys remember the rose called Iceberg, right? Iceberg is the rose that brought roses into the landscape, right? That was the first time. Before that, we thought we had to put roses in lines. We thought we had to debud them to make them that long stem rose and ready for a competition. We had to get the rose petal count, you know, and all those kinds of things that you have to do. And we had to prevent mildew and spray those little nasty aphids and all those things. And all of a sudden, Iceberg showed up in the landscape. And people are driving by and go, oh my gosh, look at all those white flowers. I wonder what the heck that is. And boom, roses went into the landscape. Well, Spanish Red is like a red version of Iceberg. Not that Iceberg had anything to do with the mom and the papa of it, but it grows like an iceberg. It gets this high, and it flowers non-stop red year-round. Now there is one disappointing feature about it that's not quite as cool as iceberg. See, the iceberg rose at certain times of year will develop this complete matching color-coordinated white coating of mildew on its leaves to go on with the flowers. And Lord knows we've tried to get the white on the leaves to contrast with the red flowers on this plant, but even planted right up next to the coast, in fog, in rain, in Portland, in Washington, we can't get it to develop. Dang. So we just have to have this really beautiful, richly fast-growing, green lead, luxurious foliage, red flowering rose, and that's kind of a disappointment. There's one more rose here. Oh, there's one more rose. Check out the flowers on this. Anybody want to describe what color that flower looks like to them? I just want to see who's colorblind. Is anybody guessing purple? Okay. What's that look like to you? Orange, kind of? Tomorrow it'll be cherry. It's a color-changing rose. It opens up one day yellow, next day orange, next day salmon, next day cherry. A lot of times gets very roughly petals on it. I like to bring this rose because I had nothing to do with its development, but I know the person who did. This is a treasure that comes from a treasure. There's a woman named Lori Chafin, and I think you ought to Google her, look her up, or see if you can run across her in Facebook. That's Chaffin. She was the owner and developer of a little nursery in Yorba Linda called Pixie Treasures. And she specialized in miniature roses. And she had a little acre spot, and she is a National Heritage Treasure. She was there for 50 years. And you could go to this meticulous, spotless little rose nursery and speak to somebody who lived, breathed, soaked in, absorbed, and produced by osmosis roses. And she knew everybody. And she knew the Rose Book and the Rose Bible and how to correctly taxonomically figure out what is what. And she just retired about last year from being the Rosarian at Rogers Gardens in Newport Beach.
Oh.
Because unfortunately her property got sold out from underneath her in Yorba Linda a few years earlier. You know, one of those lovely family things, where somebody dies and they split up the assets. Really sad. So if you ever have a chance to run across Lori Chafin, give her a hug, tell her she's the most amazing rose person in the world, and let her tell you some stories. Wow, she's great. So this rose is her own hybrid. It's called Sunny Side Up. We're the only ones that have it because we saw it. My wife Jackie and I used to go and visit her, and we saw it and we just go, oh my gosh, this is an amazing rose. It blooms all year round. Emphasis on while it's freezing and turning your bougainvilleas black in the middle of winter. Lush foliage, gorgeous, gets about chest high when it's full grown, rich, luxurious leaves, bronzy red when their new growth comes out, and then turns to green. And it's just one of the most amazing roses you've ever seen, Sunny Side Up. And like I say, to me, the most important thing is that it's a tribute to Lori. And if you ever run into her, Google her, Facebook her, find her, tell her how much you'll love her and how special she is to us gardeners. Okay. Now, Iris bare rooting 101. You've done this before, right? What about Iris?
What about?
My little mama, see, Iris grew up in the Sierra Nevadas. Where I grew up, we're talking easily 20 degrees below zero in the wintertime. In fact, one time, I had a greenhouse, and it got to be 42 degrees below zero. I was still a teenager, very excitedly collecting cactus and succulents, and already selling them at the ripe old age of 12 years old. And we had a freeze one year, and it was 42 degrees below zero. That would be in the Reno-Carson City Valley on the flip side of the Sierra Nevadas. It was so cold that the diesel fuel that runs through a thin copper tube that goes to the heater to my greenhouse turned to bubble gum and stopped flowing. And so all of my plants were ice cubes the following morning, and then a total meltdown. So it gets cold up there. Iris don't bloom, bearded iris don't bloom very well down in Southern California. You want to know why? Because they miss that cold. They're kind of like me. You know, I'm going, where's the snow? You know, where's the cold weather and stuff like that? And so they miss it. But still, you can get them to bloom. In fact, getting them to bloom sometimes means treating them pretty harshly, not very much water at all. And they tend to bloom kind of confused in January instead of like March, April, May when they're supposed to in a colder climate. If any of you guys live up in the mountains, you know, like Julie and stuff like that, they'll do beautifully for you. Okay? Ready? Okay? Ready? That's it. Oh, you can let that lay around for a month or two and plant it. Go. Any special care while I'm letting it lay around? Well, try not to drive over it with the tractor. Okay? And iris, bearded iris, when you plant them, by the way, this is a rhizome that likes to creep along the surface of the ground. So you only plant it about 3/4 deep, just so a little bit of that rhizome is sticking out. And that'll give you the best results. What color iris is this? Green. That'll be in the free stack of stuff stack. Okay? So, you know, always when you're doing bare root, you're going to just kind of clean off, you know, the excess leaves and gorbola and stuff like that. We're always reducing foliage so that there's less transpiration and less drain and draw on the stem and the roots that remain. Okay? And there you go. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about love and romance. What is it? Society garlic. Okay, let's think about that word, garlic. It's a lovely word. Makes you think of Italian food and pizza and savory flavor. You walk into the kitchen and you smell the garlic. And it's true, when you break a leaf on this, you get that lovely garlic smell, which very quickly turns into dead armadillo on a Texas road in July smell. Or when you let the air out of an old rubber tire smell. Or I remember my first day in gym class in junior high school. And the coach walked us into the locker room and they bolt cuttered open this locker and swing the door open, and the rotten gym clothes that some kid had left there and never laundered all last year almost crawled out of the locker. And the smell that came across the room came in a purple puff of cloud. And all of us just fell to our knees and dropped. It was the most horrible thing I've ever smelled in your life. Well, that's what this kind of smells like after a while. And the interesting thing about it is like, say you're handling it and working with it and stuff, and you go, my, that really doesn't smell good, and you go to wash it off with soap and water, that just rehydrates the smell. That makes it fresher. Well, that's all an entertaining and fun story and everything. Here's where the problem came in. I was a single man at one time, and I used to do business with a plant broker, a very large and reputable plant broker that operated out of Orange County by the name of D.L. Cunningham, and it's a family-run business. And they're British. They're kind of starchy and very formal, you know, chick, and very formal, business-like, and that kind of thing. All that sort of rot, okay? And that's how they were. And they're pleasant, lovely people, but it was just always very formal. And I would call them up, and I would always, after conducting business with them over the phone, put the phone down and go, boy, that was sure formal, because I'm not, okay? I don't know if any of you guys noticed that. So one day I called up, and this voice answers, just like bubbly and happy and cheerful and inviting and pleasant. And I thought, whoa, I've got the wrong number. And she says, no, this is D.L. Cunningham. Well, it turns out that this new woman who worked for them, her name was Jackie. And I started enjoying calling D.L. Cunningham. And when I would call, she would answer the phone, and the sound, this was in the days of old-fashioned phones still, you know, but the sound was so beautiful that came out of that receiver that I would literally hold it over my head like a shower head and just let that joy and happiness rain down on me. Okay? So one day she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to put you on hold." And I said, "Too bad they got that classical music, you know." She goes, "I know." She goes, "Wouldn't it be cool if they had country western?" She goes, and I go, "You like country western?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "I do too." And she said, "Well, you'll never believe this." She goes, "But I write country western music." I said, "You'll never believe this, but I write country western music." You remember that classic I wrote, Bungee Lover? Grab your suntan lotion, get your bungee oil. I only want to kiss you before you recoil.
Oh, no.
Went around a lot. So we decided that we had to meet each other and compare our work, right? And so we finally did meet each other and compare our work, and we were disappointed because it turns out that she wrote lyrics and I wrote lyrics. And both of us were looking for somebody who wrote music to go with the lyrics. So that didn't work out. But the thing that did work out is we had met for lunch on the grassy knoll of the park in Newport Beach that overlooks the bay with all of the sails and masts gently rocking while we were doing our talking. And it actually turned out like there seemed to be some kind of an attraction going on. And so this was fairly nice and everything, and actually things kind of progressed pretty nicely. And I don't know what she was thinking about me, but I thought, wow, kind of like this girl, okay? So we put together a second date. And the second date just so happened to be in about late February, which just so happens to be about the time of year when we split about 10,000 society garlics, me and my guys. And so we're out there chopping and splitting and chopping and splitting and splitting and chopping, and then I'm getting ready for the big date, the next date. And I go up to Orange County, and I got my good-looking clothes on, you know, my cowboy boots that are only partially dirty and stuff. And I get up there, and we have this date, and the chemistry just didn't seem the same. She seemed a little slowed down, a little drawn back. Well, it turns out over the years that Jackie admitted that day she thought I had a serious hygiene problem. And that was pretty close to being the deal breaker. I might still be single and available to this day. What can we learn from that? Any of you folks who have teenage teenage daughters or teenage granddaughters, and you'd like them to stay focused and go all the way through college before starting out on these relationships and developing other things like that. What you do is you take the society garlic and you mush it all up really well, and each morning before they go out, you wipe them down with it. And I guarantee you they will remain focused on their schoolwork and have nobody interested in them in the way of romance. Now see, isn't that a useful product? Okay. By the way, society garlics I actually like. I'm not so fond of the green because the green stinks even when you look at it and on a hot day when you walk by it. The variegated is about half strength. Okay? So, there we go. Out of pot, out of ground, that's what it looks like. Oh, by the way, the crazy thing about this is like the world's most versatile plant. You can grow it dry. I mean, like water it once every 2 months in the hottest part of summer. It'll still be alive. And I planted a piece of it with roots with it underwater in my pond because somebody told me you could actually grow it as a water's edge aquatic plant. Okay? And I've had it there for 4 years with its little leaves sticking out, its little purple flowers, and the roots are completely submerged. Now, the fish aren't all that happy about the smell. They think that they moved to the low rent district, but that's how it goes.
They're all single.
They're all single. They do. Lonely fish. Okay? Same thing. I cut the roots. I cut that. That's a clump. Do not split it into smaller clumps and give it to friends and neighbors.
Oh.
Do not. And so you just slice through. And shazam, bam, you've got plants that you can plant. They'll root out and they'll be good plants to go in just a little while. Anybody like to touch and feel and rub this? Okay. Okay. Now, like I say, don't diss the society garlic at the very beginning because it's actually very pretty. And it's not that stinky except when you handle it. Okay, how do you get the smell off? WD-40. I'm serious. WD-40, spray, wipe, rub, then get soap and water, wash, and it comes off. Okay? What's another way? The mechanics hand cleaner that they use to, they wipe on and rub on for a while before they soap and water to get grease off. That'll take it off. Soap and water makes it smell more virile, more manly, like Manly who hasn't taken a bath in 4.5 years. Okay? So, that's the story of society garlic and romance. Anybody know what that is? No? Okay. Finally, I got to stump the experts. Yes, it is a tulbagia. That's a tulbagia. This is tulbagia fragrans. What does that mean? The Latin for fragrans means smells good. The flowers on this have actually a fragrance to them. You can pick them and put them in a bouquet. No garlic smell. The leaves have no garlic smell. The leaves look like an agapanthus, except this is an agapanthus that is bulletproof. You can put it in a planter in the parking lot in Anza Borrego Desert, where the surface temperature is about 162, and it's having a good day. It doesn't burn to a crisp like an agapanthus would. It blooms extremely heavily in Southern California in the winter, around January-ish, February-ish, just masses of purple flowers that smell sweet and good. I guess you could say that this is a politically correct society garlic.
Say the name again.
Tulbagia, Tulbaghia, and then fragrans. Actually very hard to find. Where could I get this? I think there's a place called Waterwise Botanicals that has these.
And there's a white form.
There is a white form.
There's a white form.
Yes, but we don't discriminate. So we wouldn't treat a white one any differently than the purple one.
Do you sell it?
No, we don't have it.
No.
I found it didn't flower as much, so I kind of locked into the purple.
Okay.
But it's all white with me if you have one.
I do.
Okay, cool. Okay, perennials. I think now you've put up with a lot from me, and you've been very patient and very nice. And so I think it's time to take a little bit of an aromatherapy break. And we'll start out with this guy. Really doesn't matter how you get it, but we'll just crinkle up some, and you can pass it around. Okay, let's check this out. Just put a little mush in your hand, and then pass it on down. Okay, now you guys all getting in that Zen moment? Okay. You didn't know you could do that today, did you? Okay. And I didn't even bring my yoga tights.
I'm afraid.
You're afraid? Good. Doesn't it look like a lot of chewing tobacco that I just put in your hand? Kind of feels like it too. Here, pass that around back and forth. No. There you go. Want to try that? There you go. Okay. Let me get a little bit more coming down this side here. Okay. What you're smelling is a plant called Plectranthus amboinicus. It's a succulent. Do you know that it is one of the most powerful antidote plants to poison ivy that you can get your hands on? Or how many of you have struggled with the nasty burns of euphorbia sap, for example? You had enough?
I can remember
Are
when
we
got
over
it.
smelling you?
No, I have.
Okay. Okay. It's hypoallergenic, but no, it's not a joke. It seriously is fantastic. Amboinicus, Boinicus. You can actually go to plectranthuscomfort.com on the internet, and it'll teach you more about the plant. And it has skin and burn healing powers that are much stronger than aloe vera. It is an ugly succulent.
What does it look like?
It looks like a rambling weed,
It's like mint. It's got pretty.
but not quite that attractive. Okay. How about another one? A little bit. The catnip mint. This is the little one. There's a low-growing one and a taller one. And I think the Fascinii is the taller one. This is I can't remember. I'm getting too old. Yes. Catnip mint. Nepeta catarensis. Nepeta catarensis. Okay. There you go. Okay. Do bunnies eat it? Okay, this young lady in the back corner said, do bunnies eat it? No. They can't stand it. They also can't stand society garlic. They also can't stand bearded iris. They also can't stand most succulents.
You ever had a deer where you are?
Have I ever had a deer where I am? At the Waterwise Botanicals property, no. At my property up in Mariposa, right next to Yosemite, the neighbors are really ticked off at the deer because you have to close the gate on the patio that you walk up the stairs to keep the deer from coming up to your front door and eating your roses. That's the kind of deer we have. Okay, so now we're talking about bare rooting a perennial. Oh boy, this is complicated. Reduce the vegetation size. Dig it out of the soil, take it out of the root ball, do whatever you do. Get it down to bare root. Put it in a plastic bag with moisture and a little bit of sawdust, and you're done. Do you know that used to be how most perennials were sold? Maybe 60, 70 years ago? You would go to a mail order catalog and you'd get your perennials a little wad like this wrapped in a plastic bag. And then you go out and plant it. Before that, they couldn't do that because they hadn't invented plastic yet. That shows you how caveman, troglodyte, and regressive we're being today.